as I said, the loss of its majority by BJP is a setback for Narendra Modi, and precisely because he will have to make concessions now, something he has almost never made. The only few concessions we can see over the last 20 years have been regarding the farmers' laws. I can't see any other significant concession. So he is not used to make compromises. And coalition politics implies compromises, implies give and take. Nitish Kumar and Naidu will ask things for their states, at least a special status, for instance. And if they shift it to the India coalition along with other state parties, they may make the Modi government fall, and a new PM would have to be appointed. So the stakes are very high. The question now will be, is he sufficiently good at keeping the coalition together or not? And if not, who could be the alternative? And the RSS organization is waiting for coming back in the picture for a long time, and may pick up the person who could help in this process if need be, if the coalition falls apart.
So you think that the RSS, at the back of its mind, is already considering the possibility of an alternative of replacing Modi and finding someone else who can hold the coalition better together?
Well, you can't deny that they have a long-term view, always. They know how to anticipate. And definitely this is in the mind process, in the thought process of today. The BJP and the RSS may try to invest another PM. Again, if Narendra Modi is not able to keep a coalition together. That's something that remains to be seen. And if this is the case, BJP leaders, RSS leaders will probably look for someone with Mr. Vajpayee's qualities. How you develop diplomatic skills to relate to others in a non-vertical manner, with peers on a par. This is key to a coalition. Respect, mutual respect.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. How should we analyze and understand the election results? And how should we look at the future of the third Narendra Modi government? Those are two key issues I shall raise today with one of the world's most renowned authorities on Narendra Modi and the Bharatiya Janata Party. He's Professor of South Asian Politics at Sciences Po in Paris and King's College in London, as well as author of Modi's India, Hindu Nationalism and the Rise of Ethnic Democracy, and Gujarat under Modi, the Blueprint for Today's India, Professor Christophe Jaffrelot. Professor Jaffrelot, let me start with a general question. How do you view the overall election result? The BJP has lost its majority and ended up with its worst performance in 10 years. It now needs allies to form a government. Is this an earthquake that's rearranged the political landscape in India, or would that be an exaggerated conclusion?
Well, it's not an earthquake. Power has not shifted to a significant extent, but the tremor is significant, and there might be aftershocks, to continue with the seismic metaphor, because it may well be the beginning of the end of a cycle. And I think that since 1990, we've seen 4 cycles in India's politics. For me, things started to change in 1990 with Mr. VP Singh's initiating the Mandal cycle, when caste politics started to prevail for about 10 years. If you remember, in 1998, the BJP-led government of Atal Bihari Vajpayee opened a new cycle of what we could call moderate Hindutva, coalition politics. In 2004, the UPA government of Manmohan Singh returned to social issues-based policies, including the NREGA, and rights-oriented politics, right to information, right to education, right to food. And in 2014, the victory of Narendra Modi made it possible for BJP to initiate a militant Hindutva supported or oriented politics. They set the tone, hence a new form of majoritarianism and authoritarianism. And today, I think the setback registered by Modi's BJP is forcing the government to return to a more moderate version of Hindutva. And the performance of the opposition is making social issues and caste politics staging some return. So India's politics is oscillating for 30 years between Hindutva and caste politics. And I really think that the 1990 moment when L.K. Advani's Raj Yatra appeared as a response to VP Singh's decision on Mandal set the tone, and we are oscillating between these two. But of course, when the pendulum goes in one direction, a cycle ends and another one starts.
Let's examine the verdict a little bit more closely before we talk about the future. The Prime Minister launched what many consider one of the most communal campaigns we've seen in recent times. He called Muslims infiltrators and people with more children than the rest of us. He repeatedly said Muslims would be beneficiaries of reservations snatched from OBCs, SCs, and STs. Yet in the end, compared to 2019, the BJP lost 63 seats and its vote share came down by around 1%. Is there a message there about communal rhetoric and communal campaigns?
Yeah, there is a message for sure that the defeat of BJP in the constituency of Ayodhya confirms to some extent. And the message in question is rather simple. Polarization strategy has lost some of its appeal compared to other repertoires. And as I said, social issues-oriented repertoires are more effective. This is something the CSDS exit poll confirms. You know, the main factors motivating the voters this time were price rise and joblessness, and the government has failed on both fronts. So there is an anti-incumbency vote to a certain extent in this election. A word I've not heard so much, by the way, in the comments so far, but I think it is there. And therefore, communal politics could not compensate. Now, whether the BJP has got the message remains to be seen. And the fact that there's only one representatives of the minorities in the government and non-Muslim for the first time of post-independence India in this government suggests that they have not registered the message as much as we would have anticipated.
In fact, on that point, I could point out that the NDA as a whole did not elect a Muslim, it did not elect a Sikh, it did not elect a Christian. However, Mr. Modi went out of his way to appoint a Sikh to the government. He appointed a Christian to the government, but he has not appointed any Muslim to the government. You think that sends out a very clear, blunt message?
Well, it is also in stark contrast with what had been in his attitude previously. You can find people in the Rajya Sabha if you need. And in the past, they needed, and they did. Now, at a time when communal politics seems to backfire, on the contrary, there is an emphasis on marginalization of the largest minority in India. This is something that is not a good sign, but we'll see whether this is reconfirmed by decisions on Uniform Civil Code and others.
It also means, doesn't it, Professor Jaffrelot, that the Prime Minister has either forgotten or worse, turned his back on Sabke Saath, Sabka Vikas?
Well, that was a motto that had never been really implemented.
Now, according to the PMO, Mr. Modi addressed 206 rallies and gave over 80 interviews. Quint says in nearly 50% of the cases, the candidates he was campaigning for lost. India Today says in Bengal, out of 27 seats where he campaigned, the BJP lost 20. Even in his own constituency of Varanasi, the number of people who voted for the Prime Minister fell by over 3 lakhs. Does this tell us something about Mr. Modi's own personal appeal during the elections?
Yes, and once again, the CSDS exit poll is really very revealing. When you compare what this survey told us in 2019, at that time, 1/3 of the BJP voters had said that they would have supported another party had Mr. Modi not been the BJP prime ministerial candidate. This time, only 1/4 of the voters said the same thing, which means that there is an erosion in terms of popularity, but at the same time, the same survey shows that Mr. Modi remains the most popular leader of India's politics. And the BJP continues to depend on him. If the party had lost 1/4 of its voters, it would have been in great trouble.
Quite right. He may remain the most popular person in the country and certainly in the BJP, but the level and extent of his popularity is shrinking steadily.
Exactly.
Now, Narendra Modi boasted in Parliament that the BJP would win 370 seats. He said the NDA, his allies, would cross 400. He's ended up with just 240. And if Nitish Kumar and Chandrababu Naidu, whose past suggests that they are not reliable allies, desert him, he will lose his majority altogether. How much of a setback is this for Narendra Modi, even though he refuses to accept that term?
Well, this is certainly a setback, but we need to qualify it, and for obvious reasons. While the BJP lost seats in UP, Maharashtra, Rajasthan, Haryana, Bihar, West Bengal, Karnataka, it also made inroads in the south and the east. So it has now become a fully national party with double-digit vote shares in the south. And of course, it has conquered Odisha, and that's not a minor achievement. So there is a kind of nuanced approach there that needs to be maintained. But the fact that Narendra Modi was always been able to rely on a majority as chief minister in Gujarat and then as prime minister of India cannot anymore, for the first time in his career, rely on a majority. That's a setback, definitely a setback.
Now, there are voices coming out from the Sangh Parivar that have been interpreted in India as critical of Mr. Modi, critical of the campaign that he fought. How do you view the RSS Sangh Chalak Mohan Bhagwat's recent comments? First, speaking of the campaign, he said, the dignity, the values of our culture should have been maintained. The election campaign was devoid of dignity. He said, a true sevak is never arrogant. He also spoke specifically about Manipur. He said, it is a duty to deal with it on priority, clearly hinting at the fact that Mr. Modi hasn't even visited Manipur in a whole year. He also said, everywhere there's social disharmony, this is not good. Do you believe that these comments are an admonition of Narendra Modi?
Well, that has to be seen in the context of the very uneasy relations Narendra Modi and RSS have had for now more than 20 years. We must remember that the parting of the ways, to some extent, started in Gujarat, started in the early 2000s. In 2007, for instance, the RSS cadres did not campaign in favor of Narendra Modi in Gujarat. And for a clear reason, Narendra Modi had emancipated himself from the RSS. He had built his own parallel power structure. He related to the voters directly. He did not rely on the network of the RSS, and he did not report to Manmohan Vaid, who was the Pran Pracharak at that time, the way any chief minister does on the BJP side. So there was this resentment on the RSS side that was reconfirmed when Narendra Modi did not accept advice from Mohan Bhagwat when he was candidate to the prime ministerial post in 2014, 2013, 2014. But beyond that, the kind of personalization of power that Narendra Modi cultivates is at odds with the ethos of the RSS. That is an organization where personalities must come second. They should merge with the organization, not prevail. If there is a guru, it's the flag. There is no Vishwa Guru incarnated in one personality. That said, it's only when the Narendra Modi government is under attack that the RSS speaks. Otherwise, they have to admit that he implements their policy, their ideology is still very popular among Swayamsevaks. So it's only when there are tensions, when there is a decline in Modi's popularity, that the RSS speaks out. We'll see. We'll see whether they'll speak even more now that the coalition politics of today will make the governance more complicated.
But they've chosen a moment when Mr. Modi's political fortunes are at their lowest that they've been for almost 23 years to speak out critically of him. They may not have named him, but there's no doubt that he's the target of their comments, and they've chosen his weakest moment to do so.
Yeah, yeah. And the question now will be, is he sufficiently good at keeping the coalition together or not? And if not, who could be the alternative? And the RSS organization is waiting for coming back in the picture for a long time, and may pick up the person who could help in this process, if need be, if the coalition falls apart.
So you think that the RSS, at the back of its mind, is already considering the possibility of an alternative of replacing Modi and finding someone else who can hold the coalition better together?
Well, you can't deny that they have a long-term view, always. They know how to anticipate. And definitely this is in the mind process, in the thought process of today.
Let me raise another feature of this campaign. The opposition made the sanctity of the constitution a major issue in this election. They claimed the BJP wanted to amend it to end reservations. That clearly embarrassed the BJP. But why wasn't the BJP able to effectively counter this? Is it because they actually do intend to end reservations? Or is it because they have other plans for the constitution which they want to keep hidden? Which of the two?
Well, again, let's look at the larger picture. The BJP and the Sangh Parivar at large have always related uneasily to caste-based reservations, even before Mandal, of course, and for two reasons. First of all, this is a school of thought that has been traditionally dominated by upper caste. And when you look at the voters of BJP again this year, you see that upper caste are dominating. And these groups have never been comfortable with the promotion of lower caste, obviously, via positive discrimination. They believe in hierarchy more than in equality. And secondly, of course, for the RSS, quota politics, and for BJP, quota politics and quota policy as a policy divide the Hindu community along caste lines. So to make the Hindus a vote bank is more difficult when you have what, if you remember well, the organizer called a Shudra revolution in the anvil. That was what they said during the Mandal moment in the 1990s. So if there is a Bahujan Samaj, if there is an OBC vote bank, if there is a Dalit vote bank, how can there be a Hindu vote bank? You know, so these are the two reasons why they have constantly resented caste-based reservations without saying it. How can you say it? How can you alienate more than 50% of the voters? So they have not said anything, but they have started to dilute positive discrimination. And they have reduced scholarships for Dalit students. They have diminished the number of posts offered via quotas by privatizing PSUs to a large extent. So the number of seats there is smaller and smaller. And they have introduced the 10% quota for economically weaker sections, which are upper caste. So de facto for the Dalits, for the OBCs, and they're watching it, this government is already attacking positive discrimination policies. Now, the moment you say, I'm going to do big things if I'm re-elected, the idea that the constitution will be attacked comes first. And in this constitution, there are provisions for the lower caste reservations. Yeah, I'm not surprised that they have had this reaction. And in fact, BJP has lost the Dalit vote to a large extent in northern India on that basis. And when you look at the sociology of the MPs of India this year, it's fascinating. I'm doing it for now 30 years. The percentage of upper caste MPs on the BJP side has remained very high. The percentage of upper caste MPs on the opposition side, Congress especially, is twice smaller. The gap has never been so big. And it's largely because caste played a big role in this election, partly because of the reservation issue.
So when the Congress came up with this attack, that if you give Modi 400 seats, he will change the constitution, and in particular, he will cancel and end reservations, they actually touched upon something that for the BJP is like a raw nerve.
Exactly. And that's why I say we see caste politics back at the expense of Hindutva. And this is the antidote. It is the solvent.
And it's something BJP doesn't like at all.
Exactly.
Let's look at this point, Professor Jaffrelot, briefly at some of the key election results. I'll go through the principal states one by one. The BJP was hoping to increase its seats in UP from 62 to somewhere over 70. Instead, it lost 29 and it ended up with just 33. It's also lost 11 seats in Rajasthan, 5 in Haryana, 3 in Jharkhand. And all of these, as you know, are critical Hindi heartland states which it considers its stronghold. So what went wrong for the BJP in the Hindi heartland?
Well, I think there are three factors that need to be combined. Haryana, West UP, Rajasthan were part of the farmers' movement. And the BJP has lost the Jat vote this time for this reason. And the Jat in this part of North India play a big role. So that's one. Farmers' movements. And I would say movements because after the big movement against the farmers' laws, there were other movements, completely underreported in the mainstream media, but of course, very much there. Secondly, you have, as I've said already, across India, a kind of anti-incumbency feeling vis-à-vis state governments. And I say governments because, well, as Yogendra Yadav said recently, you have to look at the situation at the state level. Sometimes the resentment goes against the state government, and it's not necessarily a BJP government. So you have the anti-establishment reflex, the anti-incumbency reflex that works against BJP at the center, in the BJP ruled states, but also in Odisha, for instance, and sometimes in other states. And last but not least, this caste variable. We need to return to that. In North India, especially in UP, It was one of the reasons why the BJP lost the Dalit votes, as we've just said. But I would not only explain the success. Well, I would not only explain the situation in North India the way you've done by looking at the vote against. There is a vote for. There is a vote for the opposition. The opposition did a great job. They set up the agenda, first of all. For the first time, I would say, for the first time in 10 years, after 10 years, the ideas coming from the opposition set the agenda against the ideas coming from the government. By promoting the constitution, by asking for a caste census, they have taken initiatives which have destabilized the BJP to some extent. Secondly, they chose their candidates in a very sophisticated manner. In fact, they have beaten the BJP at its own game, especially in Uttar Pradesh. In Uttar Pradesh, dominant OBCs have, including Yadavs, have provoked the resentment of other OBCs for a long time. And BJP could tap this source of vote, promoting smaller OBC jatis. This time, the Samajwadi Party was clever enough not to give too many tickets to Yadavs, but to smaller OBC groups and get their vote as well. That's what I would say I would consider as beating the BJP at its own game. And last but not least, in the states you've just mentioned, in the states where the opposition did so well, you've had a kind of counter-polarization. The coalition of India benefited from a massive Muslim support. 92% of Muslims supported Samajwadi Party and Congress in Uttar Pradesh. 92% of about 1/5 of the voters. And the turnout was high. Same in other places, including West Bengal. So to polarize as a cost, you have counter-polarization. That helps. So yes, it's a vote partly against what BJP ruled states and the BJP government had done over the last 5 years, but it's also a vote for an alternative that has now crystallized with an agenda.
Let me pick up on this intriguing thought that there was also a vote for the opposition and ask you if that explains the outcome in a state like West Bengal. The BJP was hoping, claiming, in fact, that it would do much, much better, but it crashed and did extremely poorly. Instead of increasing its tally, the BJP lost 6 seats. Mamta, on the other hand, increased hers by 7. Is this a clear sign that when there was this sharp divide between the Trinamool Congress and the BJP, this was a vote for Trinamool, it was a vote for Mamta, not just a vote that was not interested in BJP?
Certainly. I'm not an expert in West Bengal politics, but I would just add a couple of factors there, because I think that in addition to what you say, there is certainly a difficulty on the BJP side, on Modi's BJP side, to understand the strength of subnationalism. And in that particular case, Bengali subnationalism. This is where Modi's BJP misses the adaptability, the flexibility of Vajpayee's BJP. The craze for centralization, for uniformity, at the expense of federalism, at the expense of the diversity, of the regional diversity of India. That was reflected in the motto, one nation, one election, one nation, one language, and so on and so forth. I think that played a role also, especially in a place like West Bengal, where you have a sense of identity that is very, very strong. But in the case of West Bengal, again, a state where you have such a large number of Muslim voters, 73% of the Muslims voted for Trinamool. It's a huge support base. So counter polarization in states where Muslims are more than 1/4, has also benefited the non-BJP parties.
Now, one more state, Professor Jaffrelot, where the BJP suffered badly is Maharashtra. It had 23 seats, but it's left with just 9. If you include its allies, it's got 18. The India bloc won 29. Is this a message from Maharashtra that Modi's treatment of Shiv Sena and the NCP was unacceptable? And could he now face a second problem when the assembly elections are held in a couple of months' time?
Yeah. Well, again, a little bit like West Bengal, Maharashtra had a strong personality, a strong subnationalism. And this identity was embodied by the Shiv Sena. I mean, the Shiv Sena could claim that it embodied this identity since the 60s at least. So, and in Mumbai for sure, where the Uddhav faction could win a substantial number of seats, and the Uddhav faction of Shiv Sena has appeared as the embodiment of the true Shiv Sena. And the Shinde faction could be more seen as made of traitors by many voters, at least in Mumbai. But in addition to that, again, the larger picture is unity of the opposition. In a first past the post system, electoral system, the moment you have 4 groups, substantially important groups, having a seat adjustment, BJP has a problem, even with this Shinde faction with it. And this is the main lesson of these elections. Across the board, across the globe, you have opposition parties gradually joining hands, closing ranks vis-a-vis the strong man. It happened in Poland, it happened in Turkey, it happened in Hungary. And when they join hands, they make a big difference. I think Maharashtra is a reconfirmation of that as well.
There are, of course, Professor Jaffrelot, areas where the BJP did remarkably well. The first is Odisha. Not only has it denied Naveen Patnaik even 1 seat in the Lok Sabha, it's also ended his 24-year-long tenure as chief minister. In fact, he even lost one of the 2 seats he was contesting himself at the state level. What do you think worked for the BJP? Was it just anti-incumbency and the desire for change? Was it the attack on Patnaik's age and health? Or was it the focus on Pandyan or Tamil and the stirring of the roots of Odisha glory, Odisha Asmita, Odisha pride?
Yeah. Well, again, I'm not an expert in Odisha politics, but I think that it fits well in the reading of these elections that relies on the anti-incumbency factor that works at the state level in that particular case, that works at the national level in some other cases. So these elections are better understood if we look at it at the state level, because in contrast to what we saw in 2019, when the Pulwama, Balakot moment created a national agenda, this time we saw as many elections as there are states almost. And in the case of Orissa, yes, most probably after almost 1/4 of a century of Naveen at the helm, there was a craze for change. So in the context of Orissa, I would say anti-incumbency worked in favor of BJP.
The other area where the BJP has done far better than most people thought it would is South India. Not only has it won seats in Kerala, Telangana, Andhra, and Karnataka, but perhaps more importantly, its vote share has gone up significantly in Tamil Nadu, in Kerala, and Telangana. Is this a sign that the doors of South India are beginning to open for the BJP, or perhaps have already opened?
Well, the doors were of the South had already opened, but certainly they have opened more. And as I said, this is something we need to emphasize. BJP has become a truly national party this time, with these inroads in the South and in the East. We can't say anymore it's a meta-regional party. It's clearly a national party for that reason. But again, this achievement has something to do with the anti-incumbency and anti-establishment approach of voters, because they voted for BJP against the state governments to some extent. None of them being ruled by BJP. None of these states had been ruled by BJP when elections took place. Now, to do more in the South, BJP will have to dilute its North Indian upper caste, Indie-oriented identity. And that will be quite challenging. You know, this is where the vernacularization of Hindutva is not so easy. And religion cannot be enough. This is, this is the problem.
Are you suggesting that steps and measures the BJP takes to spread further in the South will end up diluting the identity that has won its support and so many votes in the North? In other words, it's a real Faustian choice that they face.
Exactly, a dilemma. A dilemma. If you dilute more, you lose your appeal on the North Indian voters, and you create space for more radical Hindutva people. If you do not dilute enough, you're not understood, you're not heard. And in the South, there is one more factor. The South is tired of paying for the North. There is a tax issue there. And this issue is even much more significant when federalism is not observed. You know, the fact that chief ministers had not been consulted before demonetization, before the lockdown, you know, for southern states, which are already taken for granted and which are already seen as subsidizing the North, this is even more unacceptable. So yes, the South is now more, I would say, BJP oriented, but to materialize, to go one step further will be very difficult, except in Karnataka, probably.
So could I put it like this? The doors of the South may have opened further than they have ever before, but the BJP will be very concerned. What would happen to the BJP if it walks deep into the room? The BJP itself could become a different party inside the South, and that may not be welcome to the party.
You know, this is a dilemma that Jan Song had to face from day one. Either you are true to your identity, and therefore your cadres are happy, RSS is happy, or you expand, but to expand you need friends, you need partners, you need to be more multicultural, you need to be less centralizing in your attitude. And for some time, this dilemma was surmounted because of this Hindutva wave, because of Narendra Modi. Now we may be back to the situation that was there before, and BJP will have probably to reinvent itself if it wants to really take root in places where it had so little supporters, so few supporters, in the South especially.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me. Professor Jaffrelot, before we end, let's look to the future, and let's look at the future in terms, firstly, if not primarily, in terms of the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, because he still is by far the most important person in government and in the BJP. For 10 years as Prime Minister and 12 as Chief Minister of Gujarat, Narendra Modi has had an absolute majority. He could do what he wanted, and he usually did. Now he has to run a coalition government, which means he has to keep his allies happy and content, and that means he has to accept their conditions and often give in to their demands. Temperamentally and psychologically, is he capable of becoming the head of a coalition? And when you answer that, tell me, what sort of a start do you think he's made with the cabinet he's appointed?
Well, as I said, the loss of its majority by BJP is a setback for Narendra Modi. And precisely because he will have to make concessions now, something he has almost never made. You know, the only few concessions we can see over the last 20 years have been regarding the farmers' laws. I can't see any other significant concession. So he's not used to make compromises. And coalition politics implies compromises, implies give and take. Nitish Kumar and Naidu will ask things for their states, at least a special status, for instance. And if they shift it to the India coalition along with other state parties, they may make the Modi government fall, and a new PM would have to be appointed. So the stakes are very high. Narendra Modi and Amit Shah will not let power go easily. There is so much at stake.
Now, for 20, sorry, my apologies.
So this is really the question. Will he be able to learn quickly how to adjust to question politics when he has never, not only he has never had to deal with partners, but within the BJP itself, he has never accommodated dissenters. Remember what happened in Gujarat with Keshubhai Patel, with Sanjay Joshi, with Vaghela, who finally left. Remember what happened with L.K. Advani, with Murli Manohar Joshi, with Arun Shourie, and many others. It's not only a question of dealing with partners, it's a question of dealing with dissent, with diversity, with a ideological brand of politics. So this is the acid test. If he cannot keep a coalition together, should another BJP leader take over from him and do the job? This is the terms of the debate for me.
And I take it this is something that is in the minds of the RSS. We mentioned the RSS and the possibility that they will be at the back of their minds thinking about alternatives. This is one good reason why they will be doing that.
Yeah, in the past, they had, for instance, promoted Gadkari as an alternative to the Modi-Shah duo. As you may remember, in 2014, Nagpur was not in favor of Amit Shah becoming BJP chief, BJP president, but they had to accept this. So, yes, they have names, they have alternatives to promote.
Now, for 20 years or more, Narendra Modi has littered his speeches with anti-Muslim rhetoric. From baby producing factories in 2002 through to calling Muslims infiltrators in April this year and claiming that they will snatch reservations meant for Hindus. Clearly, this sort of language will not be acceptable to TDP and JDU. And Nara Lokesh, who's now the Human Resource Development Minister in Andhra, has made it clear that TDP has no intention of scrapping reservations for Muslims in Andhra Pradesh. But today, can Modi change his anti-Muslim language and rhetoric, or has it become second nature to him?
Yeah, this is the same question from a different angle, but from an ideological angle. That is an interesting one. The question there is, can Modi be pragmatic in terms of ideology? He may, because he's a politician and he needs to stay in office for many reasons. But he may find dilution of the ideology of Hindutva risky, because if he becomes more moderate, he may open some space on his right for leaders who may claim that he's betraying the Hindutva agenda and that they are the true proponent of this agenda. No, Yogi Adityanath may well seize this opportunity. And in a way, he would do what Modi did vis-a-vis Advani. Advani being seen as too moderate in 2013, 2014, Modi made a promise. I will continue with the original Hindutva motto. In the case of Yogi Adityanath, this is all the more likely as he doesn't belong to the Sangh Parivar. He belongs to another school of thought. Swami Avedyanatha, his mentor, came from the Hindu Mahasabha, and it is giving him more autonomy vis-a-vis the Sangh Parivar. So yes, dilution of the Hindutva ideology by Modi is necessary because of the compulsions of coalition politics, but to some extent only, to a small extent only, probably. Not only because of his personal inclinations, but because he may be careful not to open some space on his right.
Let me ask you that same question a third different way. Do you think there will be a change in Modi's attitude to institutions like Parliament, the judiciary, the media? As you know, he's often ignored Parliament. He's held up judicial appointments. He's been dismissive of the media. But now that he's a weaker prime minister, or now that he needs to be a different sort of leader who needs a more consensual approach, do you think his attitude to these institutions will change? And at the same time, maybe I should ask, will his tolerance of criticism and dissent from the media, from the opposition increase? Will his use or misuse of the CBI and the Enforcement Directorate diminish? I'm putting it all as a package to you. Will we see changes here as well?
This is the key question. Will Modi treat the institutions of the Indian Republic and the media differently? So far, we've not seen any change, but we have only a few days behind us. But I'd like to reverse the question. Will these institutions and the media change their attitude? No, the ball is in their court. They fell in line when the PM was strong, and they've made him stronger by behaving that way. Now they can regain some room for maneuver. They may regain some spine, but will they? What about the future conduct of the bureaucracy, including the Election Commission? What about the future conduct of the judiciary, including the Supreme Court? What about the conduct of the media, including well, the list of the Gaudiya media is too long. I will not start that. But you see, during the emergency, the media were asked to bend and they crawled. You know, if self-censorship bound to continue in the new context, just to be on the right side, or will the Gaudiya media change? Well, for another reason, probably. Simply not to lose the customers to the online media and to the YouTube channels. It's something that I find really interesting today is, well, you go by the wind, you follow the opinion, the public opinion. And the public opinion has voted not only at the time of election, but at the time of watching media. So it's not because the government is weaker, it's because the people are stronger that things may change, which is, by the way, something we saw in Pakistan as well.
But you're also saying, aren't you, Professor Jaffrelot, that the hope for change depends not just on how Modi behaves, it depends equally, if not more, on how people in the institutions behave. And in particular, if you take the media as example, it depends upon the capacity of the media to stand up for itself. You said the ball is in their court. It now depends upon whether they hit it over the net and back or whether they hit it into the net.
Yeah, and they may do it because of their own values, but they may also do it because if they want to remain relevant, if they want to retain viewers, they will have also to admit that people are not interested in what they say and what they show if they don't change.
What about the enormous personality cult that surrounds Narendra Modi and which he enhanced very considerably by claiming that he's of non-biological birth and that he was sent by God to do God's work? One aspect of this is the very centralized Prime Minister's office that he's created. Can all of that, the personality cult, the centralized control of the government, continue under a coalition government? Or will the allies here at least stand up and say, no, this is not acceptable because you're trespassing upon our powers?
Well, it's very early days to make an assessment here, but at least we can define the terms of the debate. If the Modi government needs only 2 to 3 state parties that they can keep happy by making concessions. You give a special status to Andhra, to Bihar, and you have a transactional kind of federalism at work. The center giving to these states as much as it has given to Gujarat. That may keep these people happy. But the moment the center is further weakened, the moment BJP is further weakened, the balance of power shifts and the partners ask for more and more because the center needs them more and more. And there, in this scenario, the state elections will play a very important role. And the 2 state elections which are coming in September, Maharashtra in the first place, Haryana also, will play a big role. What if the BJP loses, the BJP and the Shinde faction lose Maharashtra? What if the BJP loses Haryana? Yeah, then inevitably the terms of the debate will change. And more generally speaking, the assessment of the government's performances on the economic front, on the social front, will matter more and more. And the popularity of the Modi regime will inevitably be affected by joblessness, inflation, the weaker and weaker currency that is the rupee. Then you can't continue to rule the authoritarian way. You need to give more, at least to your partners.
And I take it that if the BJP were to lose Bihar next year, the process you're talking about would be enhanced and expedited both.
Yeah. No, now state politics is back. Caste politics and state politics are back. Well, they were never out completely for sure, but they are back in a big way and they go together.
In which case, can a weakened Narendra Modi depend upon his allies to push through controversial issues like the Uniform Civil Code, One Nation, One Election, and perhaps most importantly, the delimitation exercise due in 2026? Can he push these through, or is he going to have to slowly but steadily back away from things he's been saying about them?
Well, the UCC has been one of the 3 core issues, one of the 3 core objectives of BJP since the 1980s. And remember, along with Article 370, the building of the Ram Mandir, already in the 1990s, these three issues had been put on the back burner by Vajpayee because of the coalition partners, but they had been identified as the three things this party should achieve one day. Now, only UCC is left as one of the key objectives that has not been reached. It's a complicated enterprise, but it can be presented as a key instrument to make India more homogeneous and united, to consolidate the Hindu vote bank against the minorities. And beyond that, the BJP may well try to kill two birds with one stone there, because if you look at the Uttarakhand UCC, you see that the idea there is to promote Hindu traditions regarding the gender relations and the patriarchal ethos as well. It's not only against minorities, it's also against the liberals, because from this point of view, from their point of view, liberals are too permissive, are destroying the traditions. So I would not be surprised if the UCC remained on the agenda, really, on the list of priorities. Now, redelimitation, is a different story, because that would make the South very uneasy. And if you want to make inroads in the South, to alienate the South, would be certainly counterproductive, because that would really give so many more seats to the North compared to the South. The South would be almost redundant in the Lok Sabha. So that one may be more difficult to implement. Let's see.
And what about one nation, one vote? Well,
that's gone. To my mind, as I said, state politics have staged a comeback in such a big way. It was already very unrealistic in practical terms. Now it may be not so realistic in the era of coalitions, when states want to have their own autonomy. What is the idea? One nation, one vote. Well, the leader over-determines the results of the state elections. State leaders don't want the results of state elections over-determined by a man in Delhi. So why should they support a reform of that kind? Well, as Rahul Gandhi says, India is a union of states, but this is not what Rahul says. It's what the Constitution says. And this is a reality that is resurfacing more the moment Narendra Modi's popularity gets eroded.
We're coming right to the end of this interview, Professor Jaffrelot. Let me put to you a question that in many multiple ways you have addressed in all your answers running through, but now I'll put it to you directly. So much of the future of the third Modi government hinges on Mr. Modi's capacity to change from old Mr. Modi to new Mr. Modi, or to put it differently, to modify himself. What will be the future of the government that was sworn in on Sunday if he can't make that change effectively?
Yes, well, first of all, we must remember that in the past, when partners of the BJP withdrew their support, the government fell. And it happened to the first Vajpayee government in 1998, and it may happen again. So this is not science fiction. It's really something that even the strongest Prime Minister of India cannot rule out. But before letting the opposition take over power, the BJP and the RSS may try to invest another PM. Again, if Narendra Modi is not able to keep a coalition together. That's something that remains to be seen. And if this is the case, BJP leaders, RSS leaders will probably look for someone with Mr. Vajpayee's qualities. How you develop diplomatic skills to relate to others in a non-vertical manner, with peers on a par. No, this is key to a coalition. Respect, mutual respect. There are people, in spite of the fact that the second line of leadership has been badly affected by the dominant style of governance on the BJP side, there are people, there are state leaders, there are ministers. I've mentioned Gadkari before because certainly is one of those who have the qualities probably and who have the support, who has the support of Nagpur in particular. So it means that this term, these elections over the coming years will not necessarily be resulting in one-man government only, and will not necessarily result in any shift from one side to the other. There might be another BJP member, prime minister, in the coming 5 years.
So far, and I'm coming to my last question, so far, Professor Jaffrelot, we've talked about how circumstances will impact upon Narendra Modi. Let me ask you a question about how he might himself personally respond. Do you see him serving or wanting to serve the full 5 years of his third term? Is it at all possible that if the challenge goes against the grain of his character and his style, that he might choose to opt out and become president when President Murmu's term ends in 2.5, 3 years' time?
Well, we are speculating here, but it's an interesting speculation. Narendra Modi wanted to beat Nehru's record as PM. But is it in terms of the number of elections won, or in terms of the number of years in office that he wanted to beat Jawaharlal Nehru's record? If it is the latter, Nehru governed for 17 years. So a fourth term might have to be won. But including to these circumstances, he may choose one interpretation over the other and play it safe if need be. In that case, the scenario you mentioned of Narendra Modi becoming president of India is certainly a realistic one. But it will depend on the state election results, the public opinion's views, and that's why the coming months and years will be so interesting. The cycle will end, a new chapter will be open, most probably, but along what lines, under which conditions, this is the kind of work we are going to do to make sense of this.
Professor Jaffrelot, I thank you for an engrossing explanation of the campaign, of the outcome of the results, and how you see the future, particularly in terms of the behavior of the Prime Minister. Thank you very much for the time you've made available to me. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you. Stay safe too.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.